At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only i3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Rapid Deploy believes that every public safety agency, regardless of size, should have access to the data they need when it matters most. That's why since 2016, our mission has been to reduce emergency response times and improve public safety. We are the industry's only integrated emergency response platform. Our web-based cloud platform includes analytics, mapping, dispatch, and mobile apps, purpose-built for 911 in the 21st century. Visit www.rapiddeploy.com to learn how we enable effective, efficient, data-driven emergency response.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and I am excited for the guest that I have here today. I actually had her on a DRT episode, Dispatchers Roundtable, round 17. We're talking about social media, public education, and we're going to be getting into a little bit of that here as well. But we are going to learn so much more about our guest today. And our guest is Kaitlin Jordan, and she is a law enforcement dispatcher and public education specialist at Charleston County Consolidated 911 out of South Carolina. Ooh, that was a mouthful. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. I had to pause to make sure that I didn't bite my tongue as I was saying all of it.
Yeah, Charleston County Consolidated 911 Center is a lot to say.
Oh man, see, and you got it down.
Just say it like 100 times in a week. So,
do you have to answer the phone that way with if it's a non-emergency line? Do you answer with all of it?
No. So we actually have a recorded answer, except for when you're in training. So your voice, you record your voice saying 911, what is the address of the emergency? Or operator, I'm 225, operator 225. It's like, I can't even remember. It's like Charleston County 911, operator 225 or something like that. It's super, it's shortened. So. Oh,
okay. I was just curious because when I was in dispatch, I would answer the phone and I would say, Allegan Central, this is Ricardo. Or sometimes I would say Allegan Central Dispatch, but it was usually Allegan Central. But, I think I would say it fast enough that when I would say Allegan Central, this is Ricardo, they wouldn't hear the "r" part. And someone would always say, "Oh yeah, Carlos, I just wanted to see if you could help me out with this." And I would go, "Okay."
Just gonna call you Carlos from now on.
Yeah. and I would just leave it because well, it doesn't matter unless it was someone who called after I was done with my shift or the following day or something, and I wasn't there, and people would be asking. So I would go back in, whenever for my shift, and they would say, there were some people looking for Carlos the other day. We weren't actually sure who they were talking about. We just kind of figured it was you because of the Cardo part. And I say, yeah, it was probably for me. Oh, that's funny. Oh, it takes me back. So as I said in the beginning, I had you on as a panelist for Dispatchers Roundtable Round 17. It was an excellent episode. There was a lot of people in the audience just asking so many questions and a bunch of different things that were going on. Now, it was you and myself and Leah, and we're going to get into a little more of you being a public education specialist here, but I want to go back, jump into our DeLorean and go back in time to you in the beginning. How did you get into dispatching? Did you have a background? Did you come from a family of public safety, or were you just like kind of green going in?
Well, let me make sure I got my start date right. Hold on, because I always get it wrong. And I texted my recruiter last week and I was like, when did I start?
Mm-hmm.
Because I always get the year wrong. Never the date, just the year. Okay, 2014. I started in 2014.
2014.
Yes. So no, I do not have any family in public safety, but I do have previous family history with public service and politics. Not my thing. So it's funny that I landed in public safety. But yeah, I started. I went to our community college after high school for physical therapy assistance because I wanted to do sports medicine, but the college here that I had to go to due to some family circumstances, they didn't have a sports medicine. So I was like, physical therapy is close. I'll shoot for that and then get a 4-year degree after my 2-year at Trident. Well, physical therapy in class at least is very boring for me. It was extremely boring.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, sorry for any physical therapy people out there. Just class was like, I felt like I was watching paint dry. So I was like, I got to get something more exciting than this. So I could still, with the classes that I had taken, I could still go into another health related course and not lose a lot of time. So I went into paramedic. Way more exciting. And the teachers are way more my style, way less, I don't know, there's public safety guys, paramedics and firefighters in there. It's crazy. I mean, public safety.
Right, yeah. No holds barred. They
like
just let you have it.
Yeah, I like that a lot more. Just that environment in class, I liked it a lot more. And then I got my MTB, the basic, and for some reason, I had to stop temporarily. Can't remember exactly why. I had to stop school, but I went in to try, I think 2 interviews with private companies in our area. We don't have a big private company base here in Charleston, Dorchester, or Berkeley, a Tri-County area. So you had to kind of, at that time, you had to start in a private company to get the experience on the job needed to go into the counties. Mm-hmm. Right now, the counties are hiring like mad, but back then it was kind of hard to get into paramedicine. So I went to an interview for one of the local agencies, the private companies, and I was really tiny at that time, like very small, and I didn't realize
like that big or.
Yeah, I was 125 pounds,
mm-hmm.
which is pretty much the weight of a stretcher. I mean, with a small person on it, that's 125 pounds. So I'm not saying that girls, because there are some awesome paramedic girls out there that are smaller than 125 pounds and they're like 4'9" and they're awesome. Mm-hmm. It just didn't work. Just didn't work. I don't know if it's because I was very young or what, but I don't know. The interview, the physical test portion of the interview, I was like, oh my gosh, this is heavy. Like, I'm definitely gonna drop somebody down the stairs in my mind. I didn't say that out loud.
Right, but, yeah.
So needless to say, I didn't get the position where in the private company. So I was like, okay, I don't want to let that EMTB collapse because I want for collapse. What's the word I'm looking for? Brain fart. Lapse. I didn't want to let the license lapse. I was so close. You were
good.
So yeah, I didn't want to let that lapse, but I needed a job. So I went into food service, which I'd been familiar with before. I was already at Chick-fil-A, and kind of just did that for a while, Chick-fil-A, and then I went into serving, which I was really bad at serving, like waitressing, terrible. And then I started, like I still wanted to do public safety, but I realized that being on the road as a paramedic probably wasn't the thing that I wanted to do necessarily. So I went in to apply at 911. I applied 3 times, took the critical test twice. They didn't accept my first 2 applications. And then the third one, I didn't go to the critical because I had an interview that day, the same day at Journeys. Worked at Journeys for a year as a co-manager, and then I still wanted to do 911, so I applied again. And Michelle, my recruiter, who's now one of my BFFs at work, hired me. And that's where I started in 2014.
Oh man. Okay, so and this is not a pun to where you ended up working, but I was going to say this has been a journey.
Yes, quite the journey. From Journeys.
Right, yeah. So okay, let's go back a little bit. So you end up going and you take what is actually the physical test that you did? What all does that entail? Like, the reason I ask is because I at one time I went out to be a Florida state highway working for the patrol for troopers and stuff, to be a trooper rather. And one part of that physical test, I mean, like there was hurdles and I mean there's a lot more to it, but the stuff that I remember specifically, one was hurdles, and they went all the way up and then all the way down, and right after that there was, I think it was 100 or 110 pound dummy that, like dead weight, that you had to pull. And so I always remember that. So that's why I was curious, what type of physical test was it that they had you take?
I can't remember everything. I specifically remember the thing that I couldn't do. And that was, so basically I had a partner, and this partner was on the bottom side of the stairs, and we were carrying a stretcher down the stairs. And I just physically, my arms would not hold the rest of the stretcher. Like it just wasn't working because I was so tiny. And really, like, I wasn't an athlete in high school. I was just very skinny, like all the time. I still am somewhat skinny. Thanks, dispatch. But it's, I just was so small, like I couldn't do it. I just physically could not do it. So I think everything else is like squats with some weight and stuff like that, which was normal. I expected that. But it's just a stretcher that killed me. So.
Oh man. Yeah. So, okay. So then you end up moving from there, you end up, going into retail and such, and also management. My brother actually worked at a Journeys and was a manager at Journeys for a while himself before he ended up working. Yeah, before he ended up working at the company where he's at now, the company that I used to work for as well, in digital. But so you end up actually getting all of this experience. You still have this love for public safety, and you go through retail, customer service. You're building that up as well, because that's, kind of some of the stuff that you need as well, those people skills. And you're doing that face to face there at Journeys with, people who are possibly pissed off because they didn't get, a discount, or they needed to bring something back, and they're just having a shit day or something. So you got to have that face to face. And then you let's see, you had taken the test twice, right, in the critical, and then you end up going for that third one, and you make it. So for those who are watching and listening, what exactly is critical, and what does that involve?
So it's a computer test, and I know for us the biggest hurdle was always typing. So you have to be able to type 35 words per minute or more, and that's including like corrections and stuff. The score works in the corrections and all that. So that was the biggest hurdle. If you failed your words per minute, you might as well just dip because there's no point in finishing the test. And then everything else is like problem solving, prioritizing, what kind of agency would go to what kind of call, memory retention, and map reading. So I took that 3 times and I passed it all 3 times. The first time this was my highest score. The second time was a little lower, and then the third was like low, and I was like, well, I don't know. And then I got the job. So
well, so that's awesome though. You know, you didn't give up. Like I was saying, you know, that there was something there that you know, that stuck with you. You know, a lot of people say that it's, you know, you catch that bug of public safety and you want to, you know, help, and you want to do different things with whether it be answering calls or being out in the field, you know. And so with that test, the reason I asked as well is because when I was going into different centers, there was only 2. The one that I ended up landing in after my first initial position in Florida, when I came back home to Southwest Michigan, there wasn't a test like that. You know, one of the tests that we had was, you know, I'm sitting in a room with like 20 or 30 people. We're all in there together, and over the intercom is radio traffic that they play, and it's traffic between dispatch and an officer, and we have to write down what we thought they were saying, and that's how they narrowed it down.
That's rough. That's real tough.
Right. And you know, depending on the traffic, the radio, or whatever element is going on, sometimes that traffic just kind of sounds horrible. You know, you end up developing that dispatcher ear where you can actually break down the conversation and hear what it is that they're saying. And for me, I'd already had about 3.5 years worth of listening to traffic like that. So it was easy for me. But I remember seeing people looking around with the look on their face, like, for real?
What the hell did he just
say? Yeah, exactly. And I remember the officer who was talking kind of sounded like he was, you know, the microphone was like really up into his mouth, like he was eating it. And so I was just writing down everything that was going on, but you know, they ended up narrowing it down from that 20 to 30 to like 10 people. Like that was just one of them. I ended up having, you know, a typing test as well. You could only mess up 3 times. And I remember I was typing and I thought, oh, man, I got this. And I'm typing and then I messed up and I thought, okay, I'll go a little bit slower. And then I hit backspace, and that was an accident, or that was, you know, a mess up as well. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna hunt and peck. I know how to type, but I'm being, you know, loosey-goosey with it, and I'm gonna mess up. So I was doing the hunt and peck, and I got higher than the 35 that we needed per minute.
That's good.
Yeah. So I was able to make it with that, but we didn't have, you know, that specific type test. You know, we didn't have a critical type thing. Everything was split up, and then we had a written test. There was like 100 questions. We only had so much time to get it done, but it was all basically common sense.
And is that during training, or is that just for the hiring process?
That's just the hiring process. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I mean, critical, like, that's the only test that we had. We had, you know, like psych tests and drug tests and all that, but like, that's the only like mental capability test that we had to do. 100 questions for a test that I haven't even gotten hired for. I'm like, dang, that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It was 100 questions. And I think we got an hour to do it. But even with those questions, like some of them you had to read a few different times because they were tricky. Like with the answers that they gave, of course, multiple choice, a lot of those sound like they could be the answer. And I remember I missed one. And I still, to this day, it pisses me off because I remember that question and I second guessed myself. And if I ever had to take that test again, I would know. But damn it, yeah. that one really made me mad. But yeah, that was all before we even got hired or anything. That was all in the beginning. And the interview, one of the interviews was a 6-person panel interview where it's you on one side of the table, 6 people on the other. They each get their own. Yes, they each get their own set of questions, but all the other people are throwing in their own at that same time. And that one was like 3 hours long.
Gosh, I had a 3-panel interview. It was our operations manager at the time, Jackie Brathwaite, awesome lady. Our TAC at the time, Pat Jones, awesome lady. And our HR manager, she's awesome too, but she's very goofy. Both of those other 2 are very serious in an interview. Maria is a goofball. So that was a weird dynamic.
Oh man. So that was good. Then you had, the 2 that were kind of more firm and there, but you also had the comic relief, which is good and all, because that can add, a whole different element on there, especially if they're kind of testing you with those questions and how fast you answer and how fast you can think to see if you can handle the stress that you're going to eventually end up being under when you're taking, all these calls and everything. Now, did you get a chance to do a sit along at all? Did you get a chance to sit in there and just kind of take it all in before all of this?
Not beforehand. Sit-alongs were part of our training, but not before like the hiring date when we started training. Now we allow that. Well, before coronavirus.
Right, of course. Yeah.
Now we do allow, and we actually encourage that, especially with high school students. We have our recruiter worked out a pretty cool plan with one of our local high schools that have a public safety academy, and they learn ETC, and they get certified in ETC and a bunch of other stuff. So we had a cool partnership with them where they could come and sit with us. We had a waiver and everything, so that was pretty cool, but not during my hiring process. So it was just, YouTube. Thankfully, I had YouTube to look at and see what other agencies look like. I don't think there was any videos of inside the 911 center at the time, but yeah, I kind of got that idea from YouTube of what it's like. But yeah, YouTube's only a simulation of the not chaotic time most of the time. So
right, of course, yeah, it's all like unicorns and rainbows that they might be showing. That doesn't show the hell and the chaos that you can go through as well. Was it overwhelming at all when you walked in? So let's say, kind of thinking back to when you first walked in, you're hired. Was it overwhelming at all? Was the adrenaline up there, thinking, oh man, I'm about to get started with all of this now?
Well, my interview, I started being intimidated at my interview because our building it looks like a bomb shelter, because it is, I guess, but it's also built for hurricanes and earthquakes and stuff. So it's a very strong structure, and there's like no windows, pretty much. So it's kind of nerve-wracking how old was I? 22, I'm 22, I guess 22-year-old, I don't know. Had never had like a job that wasn't retail or food and bev. So the building itself was kind of intimidating. And then we walked in and I had the 3-panel interview and I was like, oh my gosh, 3 people at a time, that's a lot. And then they took me into what we call the skiff, which is like, it's a room that's in the middle of the building, and it's got a big steel door on the front, and it's like the safe room for the building. And if you shut the door, then you can't get in, and you can't get out unless somebody has the code. And if you shut the door, there's like no Wi-Fi. You can't get Wi-Fi. You have to have your own hotspot in the room to get Wi-Fi out.
Oh man!
So it's like the dungeon. They took me into the dungeon. So I was intimidated with that. And then in training class, so my training coordinator, who's now actually my supervisor, she moved into above me, and she's now overtraining too. she kind of explained to us what it looks like in there. But it looks like NASA when you walk into that room, because there's TVs everywhere and the lights are off.
Mm-hmm.
And there's computer screens everywhere, and people are just like talking, but not really talking. Like you can barely hear what they're saying. And yeah, the dispatch center is a weird place if you've never been there.
Oh man. Yeah. And I can only imagine, of course, pre-COVID time, having, like a Citizens Academy come in, and just to see, I think that was one of the coolest things for me, as dorky as it sounds, or nerdy, or whichever, but to see people come in who have never seen a center before and just see their reaction. Because sometimes you would hear them go, like they would gasp and say, "This is what it looks like. What are you all doing?" And you're trying to think of something other than
so many screens.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you do it all? Like, well, this is what we do. Yeah. But if there was any downtime right before they come in, what they didn't know is we're just like shooting the shit. We're just talking, waiting for something to happen. But when they walk in, it's
Yeah, that's when I'm doing tours at the 911 center, I preface it out in the front hallway, right in the hallway before we walk in. I'm like, okay, when you walk in, it looks like NASA. Don't take any pictures. If you want pictures, I'll send them to you. But I'm just letting you know, it really does look like NASA. And we have to sign in on this little piece of paper before you go walk around. And I open the door, and it's like, oh my God. I told you.
That's got to be satisfying too, though, in a sense, for people to come in who have no idea what you do, to be that taken back by it. That's got to, like a prideful, like cool feeling too. Like, yeah, I do. I do something that's awesome that not many people can do.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
So you end up starting out your training and everything. What was it like for you then in the beginning, whether it be the geography you had to learn, the different, software systems, whichever that you had to learn, building up to that first call that you were taking, what was that like for you in the beginning?
So the EMD and ETC and EPD, all that, we're certified in all three most of the time. Not everybody, like the older people that were there before consolidation and stuff, they don't have all their certifications. They only have like one or two or whatever they used at their old agency. But we took all three, and EFD still to this day trips me up. Like, I failed EFD once, and I hate EFD. But when I first took the test, that was my lowest score, and I was like, I passed, whatever. And then 3 years later or 2 years later or whatever it is, I took the test and I was like, barely passing. And then 2 years later I took it. I was like, oh, I failed, got to pay for it. So EFD is constantly my problem. But the radio ear is what really made me nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Like the QA and stuff like that, or Pro QA, wasn't really that. Now I don't understand it because I'm not a call taker. I kind of do, but I don't use it. So QA, Pro QA was okay, but it was always the radio ear for me that scared me. And it's funny now because I'm a law dispatcher, and that's where they put me. And I was like, well, there goes my job because I can't do that. But
for those who are watching and listening, there's a large portion that is also out of the general public. What exactly is this EMD or any of those acronyms you just used, and especially the radio ear? I call it dispatch ear as well, but what are some of these terms that you're using for those who don't know what it is? I know, but coming from you, what is it that is?
Yeah, so EMD, EFD, and EPD are all emergency police dispatch, emergency fire dispatch, and emergency medical dispatch protocols. So it's basically like a big old instruction booklet that we have to follow. And if somebody calls and said their grandma fainted or something, that's an EMD call. You pull out the medical protocol and you flip to fainting, and then you follow instructions through the call. and get that person help. And you can give them instructions. ProQA prompts you to give instructions to help that person before help actually arrives. So it's kind of like a standard that we all follow. A lot of agencies use EMD. That's pretty widespread. Some agencies don't use fire or police, or they use one or the other or whatever. But most agencies use EMD for medical protocols. And that all falls under ProQA. That's what I was talking about. That's the brand that we use is Priority. So QA is like all of that together. And then radio ear is listening to the radio and maybe talking on the phone as well in the other ear and knowing what they're saying. Sometimes that comes over. I mean, I don't know how it is in Michigan, where you're from, but here we have quite a diverse group of talking people. So Charleston has their own dialects. Like our county is, I think it's like 95 miles long, coastline. And then we have like inland areas, and a lot of it is, we have metro, and then we have very rural areas. And sometimes when they're talking, it's just, especially the volunteer people, the volunteer firefighters. Oh my gosh, it's like impossible to understand. But I'm not on the fire side, so it's fine. But I've had a couple officers from like Clinton, South Carolina, and that's super rural, and it's very hard to understand them. So getting that radio ear down for somebody that sounds like yourself is hard enough, because it just sounds different coming over the radio, and they're talking maybe faster. But especially with people with accents that aren't like yours, it makes it even more difficult. So.
Yeah, it's interesting how that happens, whether it be, when you're on the radio, or if you're on the phone, and you incorporate the dispatch ear part of it, where you're listening to the person who is talking to you on the phone, but you're also listening to those on the radio, whether it be EMS or fire, but at the same time, along with that, listening to the person on the other side of the room who might be, main law enforcement radio. And while you're taking that phone call, you're answering all of those. And just listening
at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, it was overwhelming for me walking in. So when I first started out, I was at a small police department. It was just me the whole time. For 8 hours, it was me. And
I
the
could
two
not imagine
officers.
that. I couldn't imagine. I mean, I was basically born into dispatch in this giant center compared to just a one-person center. And thankfully, we don't have to take calls and radio at the same time. Sometimes the supervisors have to, but we don't, thankfully, unless we're like call on tow or something like that.
Nice. Okay, so that is good. Now, with me, that first 8-hour shift, it was me. But when I moved back home to Southwest Michigan and finished off at the central dispatch that I was at in Allegan County, where I grew up, there were 3 of us minimum. On the weekend, 4. If there was a big storm that was going on, trees, wires all over the place, we would have 5, or we'd call somebody in to help us out. But that's as much as it got. But I remember walking in and seeing one person, like there's 2 main phone call taking positions on one side. On the other side, it was the main law enforcement radio, and then next to that person was the person who was running all the NCIC, the warrant checks, driver's license checks, plates, all of that stuff. So walking in and seeing one person with their headset on, sometimes they didn't have a headset, they would have the phone here and like this, and typing on the side, talking to the person, watching them key up to speak to whoever EMS, fire, radio channel there, and possibly eating at the same time. And I thought, what the hell? Like, I don't know, I'm going to be able to do this. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah. It's like very overwhelming for outsiders. Like, I mean, new hires even. It's like, I can't do this. It's it's very intimidating.
I think it's awesome though, when training, if you break it up into pieces, like with my last center that I was at, that's how they did the training. So there were different phases. There were 4 phases, and you started out, that first one was geography and phones, and then you went over to the NCIC spot was called Lean. In Michigan, it's called Lean. So we'd go over there and Lean, and then we would learn main radios, and then that fourth phase would be the shadow phase, where we're doing everything on our own. The trainer's there, but on the other side of the room, if we need help, we're supposed to be working with the team, and the trainer would jump in only, the last resort. But learning it, I think, in those pieces is what made it easier to combine everything at the end. Because then, once you're in the thick of it, you just start picking it up, and you're doing it, and you're doing it. And after a little while, you think, did that happen? That actually happened. Like, I got it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a cool moment too. Like, I was a CTO for a short time before I got into public education. I had 2 trainees that were fantastic. And one of them, I was like, one of the days that I was with him, the last day before, he was actually in observation. That's what we call the shadow portion. And I think he was getting ready to go into observation. And that day I was planning on releasing him anyway, but he had a huge, it was like a 4-car wreck on one of our biggest bridges, the most popular bridge, where everybody is driving all the time. And he was able to append all the calls together and call a tows and all that without my help. And I was like, good. And that was great to see. Like, that was awesome. So having that moment is really cool. Once you figure out, oh my God, I'm doing it.
Right. It's like when you're a kid and you start riding your bike and you're like, oh, this is amazing. Oh man, that is funny. So I didn't get a chance to ask you this right off the bat in the beginning. We were kind of talking about this a little bit already just a few moments ago, but the area that you cover, you were saying that you've got enough people there, and luckily you're working in this spot or this place where it's a massive area and you have enough people to cover it. So how many people are working on at a time, and what are your shifts consist of? Are they 8 hours or 12 hours?
Well, it depends. As far as staffing, it depends upon what we have going on. So like if we have weather or something like that. But generally it's 4 or 5 call takers, 2 supervisors, and a floor supervisor. That's 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 2 sheriff's office law dispatchers, that's 10. You might have to edit this part out. 2, 3 North Charleston, that's 13. 2 for the city, that's 15. NCIC is 16. Mount Pleasant is 17. Isle Palms is 18. And then 1 fire dispatcher, 19. 21. 21 people generally at a time. And we have 38 consoles total, but they up staff for like hurricanes and stuff. We have extra space if like one of the island NCIC people need to come over, or like the downtown NCIC people need to come over. We have extra space for them as well. So,
man, that is
cool.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot of people. But and that's excellent though. And of course, because of the area, you got to have all those everyone working to be able to get that done as well. So do you remember your first call by any chance, or any of those early calls that you had in the beginning there?
Well, I never took 911 calls at Charleston County. I did take a couple 911 calls in Florence, but that was when I was there for kind of like a TERT activation, which I'm certified to take calls, but I'm not trained. So for, I specifically remember the first time that I ever got a little scared on the radio. So I had a couple officers going to some kind of disturbance with a knife behind an abandoned house or something like that. It was super shady and weird. So after the second officer got on scene. I had the channel on emergency, and they told me I could open it, so I opened the channel for like normal radio traffic because they were out of danger. They were fine. And then I hear this female officer's voice come over the radio asking for help. And I looked over and I was like, but they just told me to open. And my CTO just smacked me out of the way. And she was like, I don't know what's going on. And that's why I'm taking over, because I have no idea what's happening, which I would have done the same thing too. So the officer ended up, she was running code to that call where they were fighting with somebody behind that residence. She was going to that call, but she got in a wreck, and her car like did a 360 and hit a light pole. But we didn't know that at the time because we thought that she was there at the call and something else happened that the other officers didn't know about. So that was really scary. She turned out okay. Her knee got pretty messed up and she busted a tooth through her lip, but it was a really bad wreck. But it was so bizarre and nerve-wracking. And my CTO was like, you see how things can change in an instant because you thought everything was fine.
Right.
And thankfully, it had nothing to do with that call. I mean, it did because she was running code to it, but she just like started slowing down and went through an intersection and the light was green. Yeah. That was scary. And thankfully, Octavia was like, all right, you can't handle this. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to handle it. Thankfully, because I was like, what happened? So that was the first time being scared on the radio. But, and to answer your question about hours, I forgot to answer the question about hours. We work 12 hours, 5:45 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 5:45 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Nice. So we're kind of the same there. I was 4:30 to 4:30 in the for the night shift. So, man, yeah, those types of incidents that happen, those are ones that really, you're like sitting at attention now. You could be doing whatever else it is, but when you hear something like that come over, if somebody calls out or a call comes in and you're the one dispatching it out, you're just focused, laser focused on everything that is going on. I remember to your point, or your trainer's point rather, that anything can happen in a moment's notice in public safety in 911. I remember my brother had come to visit there in dispatch, and I was sitting on radios, and we had an officer who had checked out at a residence where in our in-house or database there was information where someone who lived there did not like law enforcement at all, and they knew that they knew this. He had checked out there. He was waiting for backup, and the person that they were that note was about was coming outside, and the closest officer for backup, it had been raining, and he was hauling ass to get over there, and as any of the backup should be, but he ended up hitting I can't even think of what it is now. Oh, there was water over the road, so he ends up hitting it, and he ended up crashing. So now we've got something even more that's going on, and help going to the one officer, and also help going to this other officer now because he was hauling to get there. Yeah. And I guess he thought that the water wasn't that high, and so but when he hit it, it was enough to where he ended up rolling the vehicle. So we were just I remember going through the whole thing, and out of my peripheral vision, seeing my brother just like glued to the screen as I'm typing everything in. And when I had a chance to unkey from whatever I was saying, I looked over at him and I said, "Are you all right?" And he goes, "Dude, what the hell?" Because that happened, like, this is going on right now. And I said, "Yeah, dude, this isn't TV. Like, this is really happening right now." And he goes, "It didn't, I don't know what to say." I'm like, "You'll be all right. Just
sit there. We can breathe in a minute. We can't breathe yet."
Right. Yeah. Oh man, everybody ended up being fine. They ended up being okay, but that was, it's just another example that anything can happen at any moment. And there was another time that I remember being on radios, and a couple of troopers had stopped out at a house where a mom had called in to their post and said that they thought their daughter was being held against her will at this residence with her boyfriend or something. But when he checked out there, he said, we'll be 10-5, which for us meant, I don't need any checks. Don't worry about me. Everything is fine out here. And I remember when he had given that information and then said 10-5, I thought, I'm going to check them in 3 minutes either way, because that, if they're checking out there for that reason, there's got to be something else that's going on.
Yeah.
So they end up checking out, and within a minute or so, they end up calling out, shots fired. We're like, oh my God. And it was one of the craziest things I've only had twice on the radio when I've heard someone call shots fired. And that's a scary moment.
Yes. Yeah. Thankfully, I have never been on the radio when that has happened. Just knocked on wood.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just thinking about it makes me a little nervous. But
right.
I mean, I imagine in that moment you just got to do what you got to do, like, because that adrenaline will just click, and you like become another person for like 5 minutes, and then you can breathe and like, oh my God, I just did that.
Yeah.
Is everything okay?
Exactly.
Like you just come back down from that adrenaline. That's how I felt when she got in her wreck, because I was like, what? Because I thought the officers were going to a disturbance with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, I was like, well, maybe there's another guy waiting in the driveway for another officer and he didn't know. And I was trying to go through all this stuff in my mind at the time. And I wasn't even close to being released. That was like my second week on the floor. And it's just, the adrenaline is crazy. Like, even when you're just busy, like you got to roll over and you got 3 toes to call and all that. It's like, you just do it. And then after that, you're like,
yeah, that adrenaline dump is that is something else. You're just going and going and going and going, and then when it's finally done, you just kind of sit there for a moment and you think, did I black out? Like,
yeah,
we did
that. Yeah, it is weird, and I hope to never ever have to hear that over the radio while I'm working. But I mean, it's something that we have to be prepared for. So.
Right, exactly. And with all the training and everything, and you end up, you go through, you make it through the training and all. What was one of the reasons that that made you want to become a CTO, a certified training officer?
Well, my first CTO, it was honestly my CTOs, because I had 3. Technically, normally we're only supposed to have 2, but I had a falling out, I guess, with my second CTO. Anyway, so my first CTO was very straightforward and kind of aggressive, but in a very good way. And then just the difference in her and my second one, she was aggressive, but not in a good way. And then my third CTO I was only with her for like 2 weeks before I was released. But she was just like, she was an older dispatcher. She started, I can't remember, I think maybe 96. So she'd been around for a long time. And she was just so calm. She would just be like, when they were talking a lot at the same time, or I had a lot going on, I just hear in the background be like, don't let them stress you. You know what you got to do. They can wait. That one can wait. Like, she was just so calm. So it was that conglomerate of CTO experiences that I had that made me want to be a CTO. So, yeah.
That's awesome, because that also, really shows and highlights those trainers, how they made that impact. There was that impact on you that you wanted to do the same thing, that things that you learned from any of them, things that you experienced, those were things that you wanted to pass on to that next generation that was going to be coming in. There's a lot to be shared. There's a lot of education and everything that you can instill onto those who are coming in, where they can learn from, whether it be any mistakes, triumphs, training techniques, anything like that comes in. That is a testament to what you ended up learning and what you went through. And now those that you were training are going to learn from, they learned a lot from you as well. So that cycle, that good cycle of training continues. That's always a good thing.
And I still help with our training classes. So when they're in class, we'll do like simulations, or basically it's all just simulations. We call it skills development. And then when it gets serious, we call it simulations. Like we do radio transmissions and stuff. I still help with them. I'm actually going to help twice, tomorrow and the next day. So we give them like as real life as possible experience. Like they get into the backup dispatch center, and they get into the training CAD. So they're like really working hands-on, typing with how it actually is in the 911 center. We still do that, and I love doing that because it's like I'm helping them to learn how it's going to be in there. And everybody, like this is one thing we preach to them, like every CTO is different. Every CTO is going to train you different. They all have standards to go by, but every CTO does things different, and they're going to want you to do it different. And all these different perspectives, it's kind of confusing, but if it eventually will help you put it all together how you want to see the job and how you want to dispatch or take calls or whatever it is that you're going to be doing when you get on the floor. So
that's awesome. I love that. So you end up doing all of this. You're working your way into these these different spots there at the center. The different responsibilities as well that you're taking on. What, as we kind of segue now into what you're doing, you're also public education specialist. What was it that you were maybe dealing with, or something that you were seeing that made you want to do this? So what I mean is, like for myself, for example, years ago now, back in 2010, when I first started doing all of this, I realized that the general public just really doesn't know what dispatch does, why they do what they do. If you're calling me on 911 and I put you on hold, there is a reason for it. It's not just because your emergency does matter, but it was that type of public education to bring that awareness onto the profession and what dispatchers do. That was a big push for me, at least for this program, and what I do now is just to let them in, to pull that curtain back and say, this is the type of stuff that happens. Now, for you, combining your experience, your training, the positions that you had, the responsibility that you took on, what made you want to switch over and not fully switch over, because you're still, you're law enforcement dispatcher as well still, but that public education specialist, to take that by the reins and start running with it?
Like what is my biggest topic? Is that what you're asking? Like, what is my biggest push for public education?
Yeah, what was your biggest push for? What was your reason for wanting to get involved to begin with?
Well, I enjoyed going to pub ed events, and when I was on the 911 floor, and I realized the more and more that I went to the public education events that people don't know what we're doing. People have no idea what we do. And I enjoyed like telling them about just 911 in general, like what to do when you call, what we ask, that kind of stuff. And I think, so I grew up here in Charleston. I live in Somerville now, but I grew up right here in my area. And it's just, I don't know, I just really enjoy like being able to make a difference in my in my community. I know it sounds a little cheesy, but I really do. Like, and it's, even if I'm dispatching all weekend or whatever it is, if I'm out on the street doing public education, got my tent and everything, whatever it is, I'm helping them understand what happens and what they need to do during an emergency. Because when an emergency happens, people don't think right. I mean, even us sometimes, when we have emergencies, we don't think right. That's just, I mean, that's just how it is. I've heard that plenty of times. Like, caretakers be like, I don't know why I did that. I was so stupid. Like, well, I mean, it's an emergency. So, I mean, that's why the public they just do, like, you just run off of adrenaline. I was watching, what was I watching? Bailey Sarian, love her, on YouTube the other day, and she was talking about something. The suspect, the guy, was like, I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just like doing actions, and that was his like defense in court. And I was like, well, I mean, that's why you're supposed to listen to us.
Yeah,
you call us. You're supposed to listen to. But he didn't call 911 immediately anyway, so that was his fault, I guess. Anyway, yeah. So I just really enjoy like being able to inform the public as to what they're supposed to be doing when they have an emergency. So when they do have an emergency, they might recall what I said, and help them a little bit.
So, see, I chuckle when you said that might sound cheesy, but I don't think it sounds cheesy at all. To me, what it sounds like is you have a complete passion for what it is that you do. And the fact that you want to help people, not just over the phone, not just for those, or the radio, rather, those who are going out there in the field, you want them to be able to really understand what it is that they need to do in an emergency. Like you said, people aren't thinking right when they're in an emergency, when they're in that heightened state. The senses, they're just going all over the place. They're, kind of in shock as to what it is that they're dealing with at that time. But if they can remember something that you put out there on, on social media, I'm looking at something right now. I had this saved on my phone because I wanted to pull this up. Just looking at your Twitter profile as it is, you've got one that's pinned here where you have this short little video. It's simple and it's to the point, but powerful, because you are giving 3 different ways that the public can contact 911 for an emergency there in Charleston, South Carolina. Call if you can, text if you can, and then connect if you must. Love that with 911helpme.com. So this is passion. There's no cheese.
Yeah.
and you do this well. Like I'm scrolling through here right now, and there's a lot of information. You talk about, you've got these 911 tip Tuesdays. You're talking about missed dials here in this part, and it's a 4 tweet thread where you're talking about how to help prevent 911 missed dials, and you've got all of this information with images. And again, it's short and sweet, but powerful. So I dig your passion for this public education. Well done.
Thanks, man.
I mean, it's a good thing. And, a lot of, it seems like it more now. There are more centers out there that are doing stuff like this, but, you all have been doing this for a while, and I've been keeping track of, a lot of the posts that go out, whether it be from you or your former coworker Sasha when she was there doing things, but of course as well from the county's social media as well. That's why I wanted to have you and Leah on. Leah has been doing a lot for Grand Traverse out there for a long time now. So this is good that centers, agencies are pushing out more of this on social media, because so many people are on there and they need to know a lot of this stuff. They need to learn. And I can only imagine that, you'd probably have to do a study or something, but I can only imagine that by doing all of this public education, especially when an incident is going on, small or large, they're checking it out. It's also minimizing some of those extra calls that are coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also share some of the posts, if it's relevant, I'll share it into like neighborhood Facebook pages. We have some really small neighborhoods that they have their own Facebook pages, but I don't do that. But like areas like West Ashley, which is like a really big area, and the islands and stuff like that. So I'll share stuff into their feed as well. And it's crazy how many comments I'll get. Like my personal Facebook, I'll share it in there. And you can text to 911? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it blows my mind how many people don't know that, because the news talks about it all the time. The county talks about it all the time. So where are you getting any of your information from? Anyway, I'm not supposed to judge. But like talking about smart 911 and just stuff in general, it's like people really respond to it. And it's a lot of it on social media. Because that's where people, like especially my generation, get their news from, which they shouldn't be doing, but that's what happens. So if I want to be in their eyes, then I gotta get, you have to get on social media. So
right. Exactly. And like I said, and you're doing it well. So excellent work. As we go into the wrap up of this episode, this has been awesome to learn so much more about you, because when I had you on the Dispatchers Roundtable, you gave just kind of a brief overview of you and your public safety career and everything. But now to learn so much more and, different things that you've gone through, your experience, and, what it is that you're doing right now. This has been awesome. So thank you so much for being on. As we go into the wrap up of this, is there any advice that you have for any other centers out there who are thinking of, putting together their public education program? And, what should they look out for more? Any tips or tricks as they're trying to build their own and, be in contact with their community?
Yeah. So in 911 education, there's a lot of topics to talk about, but I guess starting out for public education, I would try to shoot for like, what's your biggest problem in your 911 center? Is it that people don't ever know where they are? Is it 911 open lines? Is it you have a high elderly community and they don't know exactly when or why to call 911, so they'll just call the non-emergency number when they're having a heart attack. There's a lot of topics. So what is your biggest challenge locally, and start there, because that's going to help, and then branch out with other topics and stuff like that. But start at your biggest issue. That's what I would think. I didn't start my public education program, trying my best to keep it going, but I didn't start it. I know it started out as like a pretty rudimentary, like 911 education for kids. But I think Roxanne Van Gundy was the one who talked about it in one of your shows. I think it was Dispatchers Roundtable, the first one. You talked about social media. She was like, the kids, yeah, they need 911 education, but really, the adults really need 911 education.
Right.
So don't just pass the adults up, because they don't know anything either.
There you go. Well, thank you again so very much for everything that you do and for being a guest on the show once again. This has been a pleasure. This has been awesome.
Yes, awesome. I'm very glad to be here, hanging out with you once again.
Excellent. Well, I will be right back here with you. If those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. And once again, there it is on the screen, wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy. And if you are looking for any bonus content, you can check us out and support at patreon.com/WTT podcast. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that is for Within the Trenches Media. And then you can check us out on Discord for The Trenches. It's a small community that we're building, that I'm building right now to have some focused conversations on public safety. So you can make sure to check that out as well. This episode can be seen on Facebook, on YouTube, as well as LinkedIn. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone.